I'm here with daemoN, head coach and manager of OG VALORANT, of course. And I think in order to enter these interviews, it always makes sense to start at the beginning, right? We know each other from Overwatch. And interestingly, it seemed like your entry into Valorant was sort of connected there because you connected to this scene by being in a team that already also had a bunch of Overwatch talent, to a degree it still does, and also people you knew from the past. So how do you think, like, Overwatch players, or Overwatch coaches for that matter, how well are they adjusted to Valorant? Is there some skill set you could carry over or that you recognize in your players that just replicated well in this game?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some skill set that you learn from the game. Either it's like literally the game itself or just the experience of working in Overwatch League and or Overwatch for that matter. But you can definitely feel that the game is very CS oriented. Like definitely if you have 5-10 years of experience on CS, it will definitely gives you more advantages and more ease to adapt to Valorant compared to 5 or 10 years of Overwatch, for instance, if it were to compare. Although Overwatch is younger, way younger than that. So I think it's just a question of giving yourself time. First of all, using your advantages of like the macro game and the kit usage to advantage, and then for the micro part, just learning on the get-go. So that's well, at least I believe so far.
Right. I talked to Sideshow, who both Overwatch and Valorant viewers will know, and he gave me a pretty, I found, provocative line where he said, on the surface, Valorant and Overwatch might have a lot in common because it feels like they're the hero shooter aspect, but actually it's probably more true that poker and Valorant has more in common than Overwatch and Valorant, just because the game and the fundamentals by which both games are won are so different, from the mechanics to the macro to like playing percentages, right? Do you agree?
I would agree to some extent, especially as the game has a lot of game design subjects to really think about. I don't think Riot themselves know exactly which direction they want to take at some point in certain aspects of the game design, and neither do we, of course. So, of course, Sideshow has like his particular way of talking about the comparison of poker to Valorant. My way is mostly about how the game sometimes can be a little bit not random, but you have a lot of this poker element where you can surprise your opponent or in the end play the meta, but play in a particular way. You know, like there's different aspects that makes every Valorant match very unique, which is to the advantage of Riot and to the viewer. But of course, on the competitive side, it's sometimes a little bit more complicated to approach, especially when you lack time or you're like a very sturdy and thick playbook to make it less RNG on that end. But yeah, at least what I really appreciate is the fact that in every game, every competition, you see so many, you don't see, for instance, the same comp on each team, on each maps. Like each maps has composition of opponent number 1 and then opponent number 2, you know, and every game is like very different in terms of composition and what type of approach and identity each team takes. So that's at least the good part about it.
I think possibly the best argument I could muster to sort of say why Overwatch players and coaches are probably pretty well suited in comparison to CS player in succeeding Valorant is because in Overwatch, metas or patches still change much more frequently than they do in CS, right? And in comparison, or also in the magnitude or in what kinds of things that happen. So by being a professional player in Overwatch, you kind of are selected for heavy grind, right? Like investing insane amount of hours trying to figure out the new thing, the new meta, being agile in your thoughts and whatnot. Do you think that holds up? Do you think like the players that actually stayed on top of Overwatch and then switched over have that grind and that desire in them, that and the ability to adapt more quickly than possibly like CS players had to, because their game changes like once every year at most?
I mean, the best case scenario will be to play and know the very, very top, like the top 5 teams, for instance, in Europe who are extremely successful. Can talk about Ascend, Gambit, Liquid. Like those teams definitely have some elements, Fnatic as well, some approach to the game that most of them are like CSGO background.
Right.
And they manage to be extremely successful on that end, especially for instance Fnatic, who is extremely unique, exotic to a certain extent with the approach to the game and to the meta and compositions and so on. I think it really doesn't matter for that end, at least where Overwatch is go. I don't really think it matters. At the end of the day, it really matters for the person being smart, being extremely intelligent, being open-minded, open to like creation and trying things. I think it really doesn't matter about the background, which is why even CS pros, I think, met a lot of success in adapting. But of course, when it comes to the in-depth of meta change and the appliance of a kit about certain agents to another agents and in terms of composition synergy and so on, the Overwatch people, of course, has a bit more of an advantage because that aspect of the game, the kit usage and the kit itself, is more MOBA oriented. That is an element that doesn't really exist in CS. So I would say, of course, on paper, advantage for the Overwatch players, but I think at the end of the day, it really matters if the person is intelligent or not about this kind of thing. And I think in both sides, Overwatch and CSGO, there's a lot of people in that spectrum of understanding that well.
Right. Now, going back to the beginning of OG, you guys actually, like now in hindsight, of course, or in hindsight of each of those qualifiers for the first VCT season, you had some decent success, right? Like you got very close to like having great results there. And then the times where you sort of like were kept at the hurdle, it was actually against great teams at the time, right? I think Heretics was one, then Raise Your Edge Gaming, which of course later arguably became the best team in the world in its core. Was also part of it. So how do you think of that time? Like, do you sometimes think, oh, like had we gotten past that hurdle, that could have been us?
From what I remember, Heretics and Raise Your Edge, when we meet them, they really shut us down. Like they were definitely the better team. I think it even translated into the score. I don't really remember the score exactly. I think both teams were very good. I think we were more confident into the Raise Your Edge match compared to the Heretics one, especially because Raise Your Edge wasn't what they were today, and Heretics on the other hand were the more or less the champions at the time. I think in retrospective, if we could have win them for sure, it could have helped. But it mostly depends on what type of decision we would have taken upon the time, because that's kind of the similarities where we won against Vitality and Guild, and it kind of showed the potential that we had. But then there's been like a couple of decisions that we had to meet along the way, and we had to make players changes and so on. I think there was a lot of trial and errors through the year that kind of put us into this situation. So I think at the end of the day, if we would have won, I think we would have been in an extremely good place. Sadly, we didn't. So that's that more or less. It just didn't happen suddenly. Right.
Then let's talk about the rebuild, because, I mean, Anko stuck around, and otherwise, we're more. It feels like that's also probably a comfortable position for you and for him, because you decided to go with a French-speaking roster, right? Did you get to select the players, and is it just like an opportune market to currently look in the French division because it's underrepresented at the top level at the moment?
Yeah, I think on that end, for the French speaking roster, we went into an off season of multiple ideas, and we ended up going for a specific direction. And at some point, we were meant with the opportunity to go full French. Of course, there's like a business side for OG and then a competitive side as well. And that's the same for me, especially on the competitive side. For me, it was purely competitive in the sense that on Overwatch, I would even dare to compare with League of Legends. If you come as a player, you know what a Morello Mikon or Zonia is going to do. You know on Overwatch what Winston or Issa is going to do. On Valorant, you have some basics of the game that are there for sure, but you have to go to a certain extent of doing the right side step, being methodical, trying to not be naive in certain. And then there's like this micro element that adds a lot of details into the game that needs to be talked about, especially on the team setting. So when you have a duo in a team, like two players being a duo on a certain part of the map or on the site, when they have to talk, it's not about which item or kit they're gonna use. It's as well like, oh, we should sidestep at this specific moment, and then we're gonna call 1, 2, 3, and we're gonna double pick. Or if you want, we can do we have a double angle, and you're on the top, and you know that all those little details that piles up. And in the end, I really felt, although I'd never experimented before, and known on Overwatch to be truly against one nation team, especially French rosters, I just felt like it was the moment, to try. And as of today, I'm extremely happy with the result, especially when we came into bootcamp. Not only did all my theory about those specific elements being talked about more easy and more natural to be talked about and be executed on the work setting, but as well our productivity and the amount of hours that we put into a day increased tremendously. And even when we do like 12, 14 hours a day, it's almost like we're asking more of it, So far, it was mostly like this idea of the competitive mindset and what the benefit will be. And I think we met them.
Right. Now, there's an interesting pattern that appears to be in esports, certainly in CSGO, where I'm not sure if it still holds up. Let me think about this. It might, but it definitely the vast majority, or in very few cases, have teams that didn't speak their native language across the entire roster won a major, right? I think the same is pretty true in Valorant, where a lot of the time when like the big trophies are won, the players play like they speak their native language. But that is a little bit confusing in terms of the situation in Europe, because surely you would think, I mean, at least in general education, English is taught. We are online. Everyone's communicating on the live servers. There's some English being spoken. But we're still not seeing that pattern of international or like at least fully European teams having great success. Do you have anything like that you could put it down to where you say, okay, it like in the heat of the moment, I need my native language in order to communicate, or what do you think it is?
It's a hard question in the sense that the moment you lack the knowledge about X team or X competition, and sadly on CS, for instance, I don't have any experience whatsoever, so I don't have like inside knowledge or whatever. The thing that I can answer for sure is that no, there's no moment where even if I need to, I would speak my native language. If I'm on an international roster, for instance, I think at the end of the day, you have to respect the fact that you with other people from other language. And even if it's easier, you have to force yourself into building your English skills. Because again, that's kind of a fault as well. Like if you're on a situation where you have to use a native language to explain something, then that's a mandatory trigger that needs to make you think, okay, I have to work on my English. I have to be in a position where I can easily transfer information to other people. Now, the fact that I'm now on Valorant and I see how the games works, it definitely made me push into that narrative where what would happen on a one nation roster. And it's true that on CS, for instance, a lot of teams were met with a lot of success. Astralis, Navi, even Vitality recently. They did good. Now, is it because of the one nation roster element? Maybe, maybe not. I can't tell. That's why I don't take this information for granted and build my own narrative. But what is for sure is that when we tried it ourselves, it worked. And it seemed to work. Of course, people will say, results are not being there. For sure, yes. But at least I see a lot of very positive element and productive element that happens within our team and our team dynamic that is there and wouldn't be there with a European roster, for instance. We saw Gambit as well met with a lot of success. Again, don't know what's the inside of the team, so I can't say that, it's because they're all Russian that it's working. Technically, the best team in the world today, even if they won for 3-2 and it was extremely close, are Ascend. And Ascend are what? An actual mixed European roster. No, I'm extremely confident that the people in Ascend are not friends, maybe, but I know that they do respect each other a lot. There's a lot of freedom in thinking and executing. And I know that they're in a happy place right now because they're all together. They're all in the same wavelength and they're happy with what they're doing together. They're like a unit. They're like the 5 fingers of one hand, collectively working together in order to do many different tasks. That's what I feel about Ascend. That's kind of what I'm trying to reproduce with this team today. I want the 5 fingers of one hand, and I think the easiest way to access it is by having a French roster. And I really want to build this in the long-term perspective and not do as many changes as we maybe did in the past in order to reach that conclusion, and reach those results. And I think as well, recently the VCT has shown a lot of success. Sorry, because it kind of dives of your question, but not on the one nation thing, but we saw a lot of teams, different teams in VCT who are winning today, who are definitely not winning before, but because they have this solidity, this stability, and this thing of creating something together with the right people, that gives them results. So yeah, that's what at least I'm sure about looking at the current space in Valorant.
And that's it for the first part of our interview with daemoN. Now for the second part, we talked to him about the VCT qualifier and how they tried to make a Hail Mary play in the second one by getting on David P on last moment's notice. We talked to him about the future of OG VALORANT and what's coming up. And we generally talk about the VCT format and its issues of maybe a scarcity of meaningful matches in the year-long calendar and how that could be alleviated or why some of that is really unavoidable. If you want to stay tuned to that, hit like, subscribe, and the bell notification. For all things Valorant with GG Recon.